Hi and welcome back. This is Marla, and today I have this video featuring the Slimline baby shower card. This is not your typical baby shower card because it's not your typical pink and blue card. Of course, this is for a baby boy. I'll get into that in just a moment. I'll start with the Leafy Background Slimline, which is from Cottage Cuts, and I also have the Koalas die. This Koalas die comes with two koala bears, one adult and one child. You can use the flowers to add a gender to them, so you can add the flowers to create a baby girl card, or in my case I left the flowers off to create a baby boy card. For the leafy background, I wanted to add some color to the leaves. The quickest way to do that was for me to use a 4x9 piece of cardstock. This is Accent Opaque 80-pound cardstock, and I am going to blend various colors of Distress Oxide along the background. I started with Twisted Citron and added Mowed Lawn. I'll add Lucky Clover, and then I do add crushed olive, but the crushed olive is very similar to the Twisted Citron, and I do end up coming back in with my blending brush and adding a little bit more of the Twisted Citron to the back to deepen the color. So the more layer of color that you add with the Distress Oxide ink, obviously the darker and more intense it's going to be, and that did help add a little variation to the color. Once I finish with this, I am going to add some Falling Leaves Nouveau Shimmer powder. Now the shimmer powder, typically you would add water to your panel and then sprinkle it on and add a little bit more water. In my case, I ended up wanting the little speckles from the powder, so I added the dry powder onto my already dried panel, and then of course I'm going to spritz it with water, and that will get me a little bit of movement. I wanted that shimmer, which is really hard to capture on film and video, but I wanted more of that shimmer, and so I will come in a second time and I'm going to add just a little bit more of that powder, and that will give me more shimmer. You'll notice that because I did add the water to my background after I did the clapping motion, that it did fade back the colors from my Distress ink. I didn't even think about that when I was starting to create this panel. I'll fix it by going over the top once I dry this very wet panel, and then I will intensify just the Mowed Lawn and bring back a little bit of that Twisted Citron, and then we'll use our die to cut out the back panel. The Leafy Slimline background die is probably one of my favorite leaf dies. I do have several different ones. This one has really petite, delicate leaves. It has a nice petite border around the edges, and I just think that it's one of the prettier leaf dies that I do have in my stash. I did add a little bit more of the water to get that oxidation over the top of that Mowed Lawn and the Twisted Citron. We're running this through our die cut machine. I do run it through twice because I can tell that the leaves are very delicate, and I wanted to make sure that everything was cut out perfectly because I didn't want to recreate this panel. The Leafy Background Slimline does measure 3.5 by 8.5 inches once it is die cut. I'll use my tool-in-one to remove some of those excess pieces, and then of course I'll take my reverse tweezers, and that will help me get the die cut out of the die, and you'll get to see just how beautiful and delicate this really is. I will add this to an 8.5 by 3.5 inch card base, so this is going to be a finished card of 8.5 by 3.5 inches. I did use Accent Opaque 110-pound cardstock for that. Going on to the coloring, I have a piece of Accent Opaque 80-pound cardstock. I'm running the Koala die through my die cutting machine, and I'm going to show you how I colored the Mama Koala Bear. So I wanted to add a lot of contrast with this koala bear. I used a W5 under the arm, on both sides of the head and under the neck, and then of course I accentuated the leg and underneath the leg. I could have blended this out even more to get a smoother blend. So if I would have added a W4 after I used the W5 and then moved on to the W3, it would have smoothed out that contrast, but I wanted high contrast. So I stuck with that W5, blended it out a little bit with a W3, and then went over the white space with a W1. I do like to go over my images twice, so I will color the image one more time. I'll use an R20 marker for the ears, an N9 marker for the nose. I'll add some glossy accents to the nose off camera, and then for the eyes, which have that embossing detail, again, I always talk about how I appreciate that in the cottage cut dies. I will use my micron pen to color in the eyes and then use a gel pen to add the whites back in. For the baby koala bear, I used a W3, W1, and then my final color was a W0. I did the same exact thing. I went ahead and colored the inside of the ears with an R20 marker. I'm going to add my glue. This is Barely Art glue. I'll add it all around that delicate edge. You can see how small that border is. I'm going to add it around that area. I do not add it to any of the leaves, and I'll align it onto my card panel. I will be using the Tim Holtz tall dies. I really love these dies because they're tall, which work well on a slimline card, but they're also very slim, so they allow you to get more lettering onto your card. For this, I will add a little bit of ombre Copic blending. I started with an E37. I blended out an E34. I also add an E30, and then I'm going to go back over the top of it because I do off camera add my letters over the top and realize that my Copic coloring isn't tall enough to cover all the letters, so I'll bring in an E39, and then I'm going to add my letters, which are going to say baby, and I'm going to cut this out, making sure that my lightest color is at the top and my darkest color is at the bottom. So you can see just how nice that fits on there. They're not too fat, but very tall. And I do stamp my sentiments off camera, so I'm going to begin with the sentiment that is stamped on the banner, and it says congratulations on your, and then I had the word baby. Once I finished placing everything on my card, I thought that I needed the word new, and so of course I do add the word new to my finished card. Here I'm just kind of dry fitting everything, trying to figure out where I'm going to want all of my letters, using my T-square ruler to align the word baby. And I did add some foam tape to the back of that banner that says congrats on your. I stacked the word baby 3 times, so off camera I cut out 2 more of the word baby, and then I stacked the white cardstock together and added my ombre colored baby word over the top, and that gives it more of a chipboard feel, which is the way that I like to create my cards. So I'm letting some of this dry. I'm adding my banner to the top. Again, I do have that foam tape behind it. I'll glue my koala bear directly to the background, and that will be the center of attention. And then I'm going to finish off adding the other Y, and finally I'll add the word new, and of course I do add foam tape to the back of that, and you'll see that in my finished card. Thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.